30 seconds.
I'm Kelly McGovern.
And I'm Shane Byrne.
And the title of our performance is
Somebody Had to Make a Start. The White Rose and the German Resistance Against the Nazis. In 1943, at the height of Nazi Germany's power in Europe, a group of medical students started a peaceful scheme of resistance. They called themselves the White Rose. The White Rose were led by siblings Hans and Sophie Scholl and their friend Alexander Schmorl. The White Rose wrote highly intellectual anti-Nazi pamphlets and distributed them throughout Germany. Here is the story of their triumph and tragedy.
Hurry up, Sophie!
I still got some pamphlets left.
The classes will be out any minute. We have to leave now.
Just a second.
Halt! You two! Come here! Hans Scholl, you've been stubbornly avoiding the truth for hours! We have proof that you produced these leaflets. What do you have to say for yourself? Trust you would tell the whole truth this time?
In the face of this evidence, I am ready to tell the whole truth. My previous statements have been only partly correct. I will now make a coherent description of my activities. Trapped, I was forced to tell the interrogator everything. We began writing leaflets in 1942. Well, I'd say it began long before that. In 1936, when I was 16 and my sister Sophie was only 13, I was chosen to bear the banner of my chapter of the Hitler Youth at the Nuremberg Party Rally, where the Fuhrer himself would be present. Going into it, I was very enthusiastic, expecting that this event would increase my fervor for the fatherland. However, it had quite the opposite effect. Sophie. They're a mindless, cowardly herd. No sooner would the Fuhrer open his mouth to speak than they would all start cheering. No one thought for themselves. They accepted everything Hitler said. The Fuhrer could have taken all their rights away, but they're so in love with him they would never notice.
Interesting. That's what Father says. Maybe he has a point. Anyway, I ran for really too hot today. Everyone was staring and yelling at me.
Sophie, one day we will put that fearlessness of yours to use.
Hans continued to think about and question the Nazi propaganda until he became convinced they were wrong. As for me, as I grew older, I too became disenchanted with the Nazi party. In the League of German Girls, I found the insistence on rigid conformity impossible to accept. Both Hans and I felt an urgent desire to do something, to show people what they were not seeing for themselves.
Sophie, Hans and I would like to tell you something.
Really? I thought you'd been up to something, Hans.
Well, since June, Alex and myself, and a few other students, have been writing leaflets and sending them to German addresses we find in the telephone book. We call ourselves the White Rose.
Really?
Well, we know that you hate the Nazis as much as we do. We're writing to the people of Germany to get them to see how flawed the Nazi position is. We're highlighting the mass slaughter of Jews and encouraging them to stand up for their rights, just as we are doing. Would you like to join?
Alex! Sophie, you know how dangerous it would be. You know what happened if we were caught. Think for once, will you?
Yes, I'm in.
Sophie!
Hans, I can't just sit here doing nothing any longer. I need to break away from the herd. I know we could all die for this, but defending our freedom is more important than our very lives. So what exactly are we trying to tell the German people?
Germans must stand up for their freedom!
This war is useless.
All Hitler does is lie.
We have to let the German people know that the Nazi party is stripping them of their rights. In the blink of an eye, we'll be like a herd of sheep. All we know to do is just submit to tyranny. Why have intelligence if we're not going to be able to use it? At this point, we would deserve to be...
Dispersed to the earth, like dust.
Yes! I'm going to write that down.
Yes, write that down. But we must address the war. How do the Germans not realize this war is already lost? They're losing husbands, brothers, sons, simply to please the whim of satanic man. How do the German people not see this senseless shedding of blood for what it truly is? It is our job to make them understand, because everyone else believes Hitler's lies.
How can the German people believe Hitler? Every word that comes from his mouth is a lie. When he says peace, he means war. And when he blasphemously uses the name of the Almighty, he means the power of evil. Hitler's not expanding the rights of the German people. He's taking away our freedom to think, to speak, to act as we please. These rights need to be the basis of a new Europe.
All right, I'll get started writing this leaflet, and then Sophie, you can help me duplicate and distribute them tomorrow. As you know, Alex, we're soon leaving for Stalingrad. We don't have much more time to write these.
Good night, Max. Lieber Vater, there's so many wounded here in Stalingrad. As medical students, there's only so much we can do.
Guten Tag, Alex. This Russian weather's terrible. Who are you writing to?
I'm writing to my father, but I have not written much. My mind is everywhere, it seems. Do you think that we'll continue writing leaflets when we return to Munich? Seems just disregard for human life here in Stalingrad has only strengthened my desire to resist.
Yes, mine too. But we need to reconsider how we write. We need to reach more people, but our academic language might only confuse the undereducated masses. We need to place more emphasis on emotion, less on logic.
Yes, appeals to emotion are effective, but must also include a call to action. Must encourage them to stand up for their rights, just as we are doing. Put their riled emotions to use.
Yes, well, we'll be back in Munich within a few weeks. Then we can implement our new ideas.
President of the People's Court, Dr. Roland Freisler, presiding. Today, we will be holding a trial against two young people, the siblings Hans and Sophia Scholl. The Scholl siblings were caught 4 days ago at the University of Munich spreading treasonous messages within leaflets. Although Reichsfuhrer Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, has already allotted for them a private execution, we must, if only for appearance's sake, hold a trial. All rise. These leaflets use the heroic battle in Stalingrad as an occasion to vilify the Führer as a militaristic swindler, and that, devolving into the form of an exhortation, calls for action.
Stop! Somebody had to make a start. What was said and wrote where many people are thinking. They just don't have the courage to say it.
Silence, impudent girl! Hans and Sophia Scholl are hereby sentenced to death by guillotine. The execution shall take place at 5 o'clock this very day, February 22nd, 1943. You have 3 hours to prepare for your deaths.
The rest of the White Rose were killed in August. The White Rose's leaflets spread throughout Germany, the occupied countries, numerous concentration camps, and even London. In July of 1943, Allied planes dropped thousands of copies of the White Rose's leaflets over Germany.
In an article titled Young German Martyrs, the New York Times honors those who gloriously rose from the mud, protesting in the name of principles which Hitler thought he had killed forever. Today, the city of Munich pays tribute to the White Rose with a monument in their honor, metal pamphlets embedded in the pavement.
Unlike so many others of their time, the White Rose triumphed over Hitler. They resisted Nazi propaganda, bravely acted on their convictions in the face of death, and left an inspiring legacy for others. However, the White Rose tragically lost their lives for their cause. Before the blade of the guillotine came down, Hans Scholl declared to his captors, "Long live freedom!"
Thank you. at the very beginning of all this research and kind of deciding what we were going to do, we all knew that we really liked the time period of World War II. That interests all of us very much. And we were drawn to resistance groups just because of the bravery every resistance group during that time period showed. But this one caught our eyes because they were centered in Germany, which was very rare to find a resistance group in the heart of what was really going on, where the Nazis were really, really present, obviously, in Germany. So it caught our eye, and as we did more research and started looking at the leaflets they wrote and the trial transcripts that were translated into English, we really decided this is what we wanted to do, because of how young they were and because of how passionate they were about their cause.
And then we decided to focus on like the ideology behind it, like rather than they did this, then this, and this, we wanted to focus more on how they came to the decision that the Nazis were wrong. And that really spoke a lot to us because in Nazi Germany, Hitler was trying to tell all the youth what to believe, and most of them were just going along with it. I mean, Hans and Sophie were going along with it at first. They were both part of their little Nazi clubs, but they both decided in and of themselves that what the Nazis were teaching them were wrong, and then they had the bravery to act on those convictions.
I was curious. Again, when I took a look at your bibliography, I saw that you had pretty thoroughly mined the documents of the White Rose organization, and so I'm real curious. You've read lots of transcripts. We've got bits and pieces that appear directly in your performance. How did your experience with those other transcripts inform your work?
Well, for a large part of it, they helped us get a better idea of what was going on behind the scenes, like understanding like how the group worked. So we have some transcripts from Gisela Schürtling, who was Hans's girlfriend, and she didn't agree with them. So it was cool. It was interesting to see her perspective of the White Rose and how she disagreed with them, but she wasn't going to say anything. So, and then Alexander Schmorl, it was again just hearing what each member of the White Rose felt about what they were doing.
It was also really helpful to kind of get a feel for their personalities, because all the transcripts were them responding to the interrogator. So it really helped. One thing we found that I thought was really touching and really interesting was when Hans was talking to the interrogator, he was pretty willing to give up the information since he really knew it was going to end in his death either way. But he tried really hard to keep Sophie, his sister, out of it. He would admit that he and Alexander kind of concocted this plan and produced and wrote and sent the leaflets, but he really wanted to keep his sister out of it. So in those kind of ways, it helped us see their personalities and their relationships.
And I think it was especially interesting with the trial transcripts. It really showed how desperate sort of the court and the judge were to really show how terrible they were. Like, even just the part I wrote out, I mean, it's so wordy and it just goes way too far. I mean, they really wanted to make them seem like these, few students were the threat to this powerhouse. And it was just interesting to see how big of an effect they were. They made the judge of the People's Court terrified,
They came to the attention of Heinrich Himmler, and he, someone has to be pretty important to do that. And they were just evading the Gestapo for quite a while, and the White Rose was really trying to hide their tracks and do everything they could to make sure the Gestapo couldn't find them, which they did for a really, really long time. And the White Rose was just this huge enigma to the Gestapo. And then what finally gave them away was Sophie throwing leaflets over a balcony, which was in line with her very impetuous personality.
I'm looking at your secondary sources. What stands out most regarding the various things that you have listed here for each one of you? What was most meaningful?
I know the books were really helpful, actually, because they gave little snippets about what actually happened. So we found from one of the books that the White Rose's leaflets were dropped over Germany while the White Rose were being interrogated and then eventually put to death. But we got some of that stuff from them, and then we were able to go and look for it in more primary resources. So I think just that little stuff that kind of told us, like, the steps that were taken after the White Rose was put to death that really helped us see the impact they left.
Yeah, what I found helpful in the secondary sources is that they revealed how well known the White Rose is known in Germany. In Germany, they're like the prime example of the resistance, and like everyone knows about them. You know, there's the metal pamphlets scattered all around this plaza. There's a bust of Sophie inside. Everyone knows the White Rose in Germany, but outside of there, it's virtually unknown. Like so many people, even very well-educated people, have never heard of it, which is partly why it's really interesting to us. But it also shows that, you know, this group they're extremely important to their home country, and it wasn't just some little thing that died out and no one ever heard of again, but it had a huge, huge impact on their own country.
So it clearly leaves a legacy.
Mhm.
If I can ask one last question.
Yeah.
As you guys have been thinking about this, you know, you've got triumph and tragedy in the title. You're being very intentional about this. For those of us in the audience, what is that essential, fundamental point about this phenomenon, about this experience, that you want your audience to take away?
I mean, for me, it's definitely how impactful peaceful resistance can be. Because these were these students, and they were so passionate about this cause. But instead of going out and, you know, vandalizing buildings, which they did slightly, but they weren't known for vandalizing and breaking things. They were known for their well-educated, put-together leaflets. So I think that is something that's a big takeaway, is don't underestimate the power of a peaceful protest, because they can have wide-reaching effects that you won't see until years later.
I think the biggest takeaway is to not underestimate young minds. I mean, these, you know, the Nazis were older people, you know, cracking down on up-and-coming families, and you know, these were young minds who saw that there was something wrong. You know, they just knew. They resisted. You know, it's inspiring to see that young students with their minds made the Nazis scared.
I think for me too, it's the whole idea that this is an intellectual triumph of these 5 young students and one of their professors, but these 5 students having the intelligence to see that the Nazis were wrong, and then the bravery to openly defy them.
I have questions, but I could go on and on. It's very interesting. I was just, you know, very quickly was wondering, were you able to find anything from their families, you know, regarding their families?
You mean today? Or?
Yeah, well, their descendants and families after all of this.
We weren't able to find any relatives, even like far relatives that were alive, or that we could find, which was really sad, because it would have been really amazing to get an interview with someone who knew them more personally. But we did have a primary book, I believe, of a bunch of letters they wrote to their parents and to their friends. So we were able to kind of use that to see the relationship they had with their parents. So that was really
That was so interesting.
Yeah, and speaking of family, so as we briefly mentioned in the performance, their father was anti-Nazi, but he really didn't have an effect on the way they were thinking. So, you know, Sophie's attitude towards her dad was like, oh, I never thought he could be right before. It's just like, oh, my dad's old. You know, he doesn't know what he's talking about. So I thought it was really interesting. Like, yes, their dad was anti-Nazi, but he really didn't have an impact on the way they thought about the world.
Well, thank you all so very much for sharing your work with us.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.